I'm going to start my talk with a dirty word, if that's okay. It's a pretty foul-mouthed word, so I understand some of you might be offended. Is that all right? The word might be so repulsive, actually, that some of you could get up and walk out the door. So I just want to give you that heads up. Well, the word is so vile that even the amazing David Schneider, our last speaker, even he can't change his perspective enough to find something good in this word. All right. You ready for it now? Just lean in for a little bit for me. The word is capitalism. Yeah, I know, right? Capitalism, disgusting. Almost half of all Americans have a negative view of capitalism. I say the word, you are probably picturing in your head that fat cat guy from Monopoly with the three-piece suit and the hat and the little mustache and this thing that goes in, the monocle. There's a sense that capitalism is all about greed and corruption and cheating consumers and destroying the environment and exploiting workers. Yet I stand before you today as a fervent believer in the power of capitalism as a force for good. Now, I'm not an unabashed believer in capitalism. I'm an abashed believer in capitalism. No one ever talks about being abashed at anything. I'm abashed. It's the opposite of the word you just take the prefix off. It's the opposite of the word unabashed. I'm an abashed believer in capitalism. I have some shame. It's because I recognize there are bad actors out there who are extracting more value out of society than they are creating. I think I understand why they do that. I understand how capitalism is evolving to take care of that, and I understand what your role can be in this new exciting future of capitalism. Fundamentally, you got to understand, fundamentally, capitalism is good. Capitalism is good because it creates value. And capitalism is ethical because it's based on a voluntary exchange. Capitalism is noble because it gives people purpose and meaning. And capitalism is heroic because it lifts people out of poverty. 200 years ago, 80% of the world's population lived on less than $1 a day. Today, it's 16%. That's the power of capitalism lifting 2 billion people out of poverty. To take a more recent example, since 1999, China's open trade policies have lifted 350 million people out of poverty. I'd say that capitalism is the greatest anti-poverty achievement in the history of mankind. So how do you reconcile these two competing narratives of capitalism? There's the corrupt and there's the heroic. And I'd say it depends on what your perspective on the purpose of business is. Most people, when I ask, what's the purpose of business? They say it's to make a lot of money, right? That's the point, to maximize shareholder value. We've heard that phrase so many times, you think it's just natural. You think it's a law, it's some universal law of capitalism that you got to maximize shareholder value. But the truth is, that's just a trend. That's a fad. It's a passing fancy. In the long history of capitalism, look, if capitalism started here, this is going to be a timeline I'm going to do for you. If capitalism started here one day, and here's today, March 2nd, 2017, this is to scale, by the way, the idea that the purpose of business is to maximize shareholder value, it started about here, right there, less than 50 years ago. It was just an idea that a guy said, and he wrote it down in a magazine. That's it, and we've been living with it ever since then. The date was September 13th, 1970. The magazine was a New York Times magazine, and the guy was Milton Friedman. And he said that to take capital or resources from a company and donate it to a charity, that's stealing from the investors. It's a pretty harsh word. That's stealing from the investors. His thinking went like this. The shareholders, the investors, they own the company, right? The company employs the managers. Therefore, the manager's responsibility is to create maximum value for the investors. That's where it comes from. It's not that he didn't believe in altruism. He did believe in altruism, but what he said was, if you feel altruistic, then do it with your own money. Don't steal from the corporation. And it's that thinking, that short-term thinking, has gotten to us where we are today. It's gotten where investors and managers think success comes from laying off workers and shutting factories and disregarding the human consequence. There's this hideous phrase that comes right out of this. That phrase, it's not personal, it's just business. That's where this comes from. And so, what do we do about this idea? These two competing visions of capitalism? Well, there's a challenge that's rising up to Friedman. This idea that the shareholder owns the company. I said it earlier, and not one of you batted an eye. No one raised an objection at all. The shareholder, we think it's true, the shareholder owns the company. That's not an incontrovertible fact. That's a controvertible fact. Again, I'm using a word no one ever uses by taking the prefix off. That's a controvertible fact. It can be debated. If you own something, you have certain rights, responsibilities, and privileges. And if you take that test and apply it to shareholders, you'll see that perhaps they don't own the corporation. Now watch this. Let's assume, for an example, that I am a shareholder in Apple Computer. As a shareholder, I have rights, responsibilities, and privileges. So, number one, I should be able to walk into the headquarters building in Cupertino anytime I want, walk through the front door of the headquarters, walk into the building, and strut around like I own the place because, well, I own the place. I haven't tried it, but I'm pretty sure that I would be denied entrance to the building. So that doesn't feel like an owner. As an owner, I should be able to have access to products and services in advance of everybody else. But I promise you, the next time Apple comes out with a cool new product, I will be sleeping out in front of the Apple store just like you. That doesn't feel like an owner. As an owner, I should have some say in the management, how the practices of the company go. But the truth is, there's this convoluted structure where I elect a director, and the director hires a CEO, and I don't really have any control over the management of the company. And finally, as an owner, I should be able to withdraw my share of the profits anytime I want. I don't think that's going to go very well. So we've broken this idea that the shareholder owns the corporation, which means the purpose of a business is not necessarily to maximize shareholder value. So what is the purpose of a business? Well, I assert the purpose of a business is declared by the CEO and the leadership team. They get to decide what the purpose of the business is, and an investor gets to participate or not, depending on if they believe what's going on. And here's the exciting thing. The incoming generation of business leaders, and I'm talking to you, students of Grand Canyon University, the incoming generation of business leaders has been shaped by the failures and breakdowns of capitalism, and they're deciding there's a new definition of wealth. We all understand wealth as financial wealth, absolutely, but there's other kinds of wealth too. There's ecological wealth, there's emotional wealth, there's spiritual wealth, there's physical wealth, there's social wealth, there's intellectual wealth. And so now this new generation of leaders gets to decide what kind of wealth they want to create in their company against what stakeholder. Now we've already talked about one stakeholder, the shareholder. We're pretty clear about them, they're very important. But there's other stakeholders too. The customers, that's a stakeholder. The employees, they're a stakeholder. The larger community, they're a stakeholder. How about the planet Earth, the environment, they're a stakeholder. How about the supply chain, they're a stakeholder. So now the leaders of these companies get to say, here's a whole collage of wealth that we can create, and here's a menu of stakeholders we can create it for, and that becomes the purpose of our business. It's pretty exciting. This idea, I want to say one thing. I want to talk about profit for a second. This doesn't mean you disregard profit. Profit's critical, it's essential, it's non-negotiable. You've got to have it. But I want to tell you something John Mackey, the co-CEO of Whole Foods, said. He said, look, my body needs to breathe oxygen to survive, but that doesn't mean the purpose of my life is to breathe oxygen. Similarly, my company needs profits to survive, but that doesn't mean the purpose of my company is to create profits. So, this idea that we're talking about, this is called conscious capitalism. It was put forth in a book by Raj Sisodia, an author and professor, and John Mackey from Whole Foods. And they say a conscious capitalism company, that's tough to say, has 4 principles. 1, a conscious culture. 2, conscious leadership. 3, stakeholder interdependence. And 4, a higher purpose. So I want to talk to you about my company's higher purpose. My company, we have declared the community is a stakeholder. That's our primary stakeholder, is the community. And what we say is we are changing the community. We are changing the community by, we're teaching executives how to harness the power of design to engage their workers, to be more competitive. We are changing the community by building healthcare environments that promote healing for the sick and safety for caregivers. That's changing the community. We're changing the community by designing schools that inspire students to achieve better learning outcomes. We're creating value for shareholders and taxpayers and students and patients by decreasing the expenses and increasing productivity of corporations, governments, schools, and hospitals. And we're changing the community by establishing ourselves as an example for other companies, and we're doing it with style and humor and compassion and integrity and respect. That's the purpose of our company. And everyone who comes to work every day, 155 people, they understand their role, what they're doing, and how they are supporting our vision, our purpose to change the community. Whether you're working in the warehouse, answering the phones, an accounting clerk, sales, project management, it doesn't matter. You understand your role to play in how you change the community. And what happens when you have a noble, higher purpose like this? People, it unleashes this creative spirit in people, and they get excited, and there's energy, and it's electric. And the company becomes a vehicle for people to pursue their own aspirations. I've got two short examples. I got a lot, I'll give you two. One of our employees in Tucson noticed that there are no foster clothing banks in southern Arizona. Phoenix has 4, Tucson has none. And she said, why don't we become the foster clothing bank? Now look, we're in the office furniture business, but those are just the widgets to us. Just the office furniture is just the cubicles and desks and chairs and files. That's the widgets. Our purpose is to change the community. And so when she came and said this, it made perfect sense. And I'm happy to say since 2008, we have clothed over 7,000 foster children in southern Arizona. That's changing, oh, thanks. That's changing the community. Another employee came to me and said, you know, every time we go out and we deliver furniture, the customer says to us, well, take this old furniture and just get it out of here. And the industry practice in our business is that you take that, you just sell it to somebody else, right? You haven't spent any money on it, you just all profit. If the purpose of our company were to maximize shareholder wealth, that's 100% profit there. This is exactly what you do, but that's not the purpose, is it? The purpose is to change the community. So an employee said, let's take that furniture and let's redeploy it to nonprofits that need it. So they don't have to spend money on furniture, they can spend money on their own purpose. And in the last 8 years, we have repurposed millions of dollars of furniture to over 100 nonprofits in the Valley. That's changing the community. So, thank you. So, I'm urging you to understand your place in history. Capitalism is changing right in front of your eyes. Think of it this way, it's being emancipated from the singular purpose of maximizing shareholder value, and it's free now to conquer whatever societal problem, the nastiest, gnarliest, hairiest, thorniest problems that we've got, just like poverty, capitalism is liberated to go after. So what is it you're interested in? Is it climate change? Is it income inequality? Is it the refugee crisis? What I'm telling you is, get past the widgets, declare your purpose, declare your stakeholders, and you can use the power of capitalism to change the world. Thank you very much.